2017决战国会由以下商家特约播映 ：Restaco 专注土地测量，精于分割规划；巴范汤森、姚太郎、鲁阳阳，您房产交易的吉祥二宝；JR Group 嘉瑞建筑，诚实为人，诚信为事；嘉利宝纽西兰特产品店，电话09-579-2887；巴范汤森地产中介区瑞，手机微信021-1900-881；帝王私人安全保险柜，我们专注保护您的重要财物。PGF 保温隔音棉，绿色环保，与您共创温馨家园。巴范汤森 Wayne 郭伟，电话021-680-263。Carwold 车世界，买车卖车就选北岸 Carwold。
观众们，大家好，欢迎收看中华电视网大选特别节目《决战国会》，聚焦两大党。今天的访谈嘉宾是来自于工党的党魁 Jacinda Ardern。Jacinda, welcome.
你好 thank you very much for having me.
Wow, you speak 你好。
I wish I had more. My colleague Raymond Fuo and Nancy Chen are working on that for me.
Sure. So, any more words to our audience?
Well, at the end, I'll finish with Sheshe, especially if I get some support at the polls.
Sure, we will go there later. So, Jacinda, let's start with the recent poll by One News Cormac Brompton poll. Labour got huge support from recently the poll. The Labour jumped 6% to 43% of support, and National jumped 3% to 41%. Just only 1 month, and you have met. Labour has polled higher than National since 2006, when Helen Clark was in charge. So how do you make it?
Yeah. Well, I would hope it's because we're talking about the challenges that New Zealand is facing and the opportunities we have as well. We want to make sure that everyone in New Zealand, everyone who's chosen to make New Zealand their home, has access to excellent education, really good health care, and the chance for themselves and their children to have a real future here. And so that's the kind of opportunities we're talking about this election. They're the things that we believe really strongly in, and obviously that's resonating with voters.
So you expect more support from voters?
I'm not taking the current polls for granted. We've seen a lot of movement in the last few weeks, and so that could mean it could go in the other direction too. So every day we're working really hard to make sure that we're talking to people about our ideas and our vision for New Zealand.
Sure, I believe you're working very hard. And the poll also tells that you are the preferred Prime Minister with 34% and 1% ahead of your English. Do you think it's a Jacinda effect?
I'm not even sure I know what that means.
You never think about that?
Yes, no, I've been asked a few times. You know, we're often very self-deprecating. So, of course, for me, the focus is making sure that people get to meet our team as well. Because, of course, yes, when you elect or when you vote for a party, I'm, as the leader of that party, I play a very important role. And the things I believe in, the values I have, of course, it's important people hear about those. But I also have a wonderful team that I'm working with. They're very strong, they've got good experience, a mixture of people who have been in government, who have been ministers, and those who also bring fresh energy, new ideas, and represent our respective communities in New Zealand. I'm really proud of that team, and so that's critical as well.
So it's not just you.
It's not just about
Labour
me.
Party team.
Absolutely, the team's important.
Yes, and on that, the Labour campaign launch, we saw the former Prime Minister.
Yes.
Helen Clark was there. So what is the role?
Yeah.
Is it a role model
well,
to
look,
you?
There's so few people who have had the experience of either being a leader in the opposition or being Prime Minister that it makes sense to get advice and support from people who have had that experience. And Helen Clark, you know, was an incredible Prime Minister, really played a really important role with Labour and in actually, you know, continuing to build our strong relationship with the Chinese community. She's someone I see as very important, so I've been really lucky to be able to get a bit of advice and support from her.
Did you take advice from her?
Yeah, I've certainly sought advice from Helen. I think she's a great person to talk to and to lean on a bit.
Sure. And what is your style of your leadership?
I describe myself as being very collaborative. You know, there's lots of problems that New Zealand is facing, and some of it's because we haven't tackled some of our issues head on. You know, the housing crisis in Auckland, where on average a home now costs $1 million. Or for instance, some of our environmental issues, our congestion issues. We've really sought to work together with people who are working on the front line of some of those issues to come up with some of our solutions. That's my approach to leadership, is to glean those good ideas and make them a reality.
So you build it up, or it's just Ardern, just an Ardern style?
That's certainly my style. Probably it's a bit of a generational approach as well. Yeah, I am a relatively young for a politician, but certainly not in the business world. My age certainly wouldn't be any different to a lot of leaders in that sphere. For me, though, it's about bringing a bit of a different approach, and that means, look, if there are other political parties who have good ideas, I'll work with them too, but that's my style of leadership.
Sure. And this election, Labour has 2 Chinese candidates.
Yes.
We have current MP Raymond Huo and new face Nancy Chen.
Yes.
And what do you hear from them about the issues that concern the most in our community?
Yeah, I mean, they've been excellent advocates, also excellent team members. You know, I had the pleasure of working with Raymond in Parliament, seeing the advocacy that he did just generally.
He just come back.
But he is, and having him back is excellent.
Yeah.
But the ongoing work he's done, even around the recognition of language, but around issues like law and order, immigration, Auckland's infrastructure issues, making sure that we maintain that excellent relationship around trade. It's fallen back a bit, but both Nancy and Raymond are excellent advocates, and the strong message I get from them is that I need to be in there as well. That actually, yes, the Chinese community is critical to New Zealand's economy and future and diversity, and their advocacy is critical, but I need to be present amongst the community as well. So that's something I'd like to spend more time on.
So we will see you more often in our community events?
Yes, I certainly hope so.
I think you will come to our Chinese New Year celebration.
Yes,
Early next year by WTV.
Yes. Oh, and I've certainly been to those celebrations before. They're excellent. The weather didn't play ball this last time, but yeah, excellent event.
Yeah, we love you to bring the sunshine to us.
Next time, because it would have been a bit hazardous, I think, some of those fireworks in that weather.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So you pick up climate change as your target policy, and the ETS will cover all sectors, including the agriculture. But the farmers leaders group also pledge to make the water swimmable for the next generation. And how will the Labour work with the farmers?
Oh, and we need to do that, because what I'm very clear on is the contribution that our dairy community makes to New Zealand's economy, particularly as exporters, is critical. But also their brand, our brand, is critical. You know, we trade as being clean and green, and that's really important to us. We've got to make sure that's a reality. I want to work with our farmers, make sure that we're fencing our waterways, doing the planting around our waterways, making sure we get the standard of our river quality up to scratch, and we can do that together.
Sure. And the Chinese surname controversy in 2015, you have said you are not comfortable with that and will offer apology.
Yes.
So today, would you please say some words to our audience?
Absolutely. You know, I certainly obviously wasn't in a position of leadership at that time, but that's something that under my leadership would not have happened. My intent, yes, is to make sure that the principle of the issue, which ultimately is around making sure that those who choose to make New Zealand their home are able to access housing, remains really important. The issue of making sure that we do take our ability to ban foreign overseas speculators from buying existing homes in New Zealand, that's still important. It's the same kind of prerogative that happens in, for instance, Beijing, around making sure that housing remains as accessible as possible. But I absolutely understand, and I've had it fed back from the community strongly, and Nancy and Raymond have of course made the representation that it caused offence, and for that I absolutely apologise.
So was it a mistake?
Yeah, it shouldn't have happened, because it meant that people didn't necessarily hear the point we were trying to make, which was about access to housing for everybody.
Sure. And you are more focused on Labour policies rather than coalition partners. There are some policies don't have details. For example, water tax, capital gains tax, climate change. You say you will have working groups to review them. So why not before election? Because all voters want to know and keep asking you. So today I have to ask you.
Yeah, well, actually, we do have details on all of those. Unfortunately, it's only our competitors that claim that we don't. So the water tax, we've been clear. For those who use water for commercial gain, they'll pay 1 to 2 cents per 1,000 litres. But we'll work on the exact pricing system with those affected. And I guess when you think about it, for instance, those living in Auckland, they pay, residential users, they pay about $1.20 per 1,000 litres. So we're trying to make sure that it's something that will be workable and that's something that will help us clean up our rivers. When it comes, though, to the issue of capital gains tax, the National Party already introduced a form of capital gains tax. It applies to someone who sells off an investment property within 2 years. We've said it should be 5 years, and that when we're in government, I want to still make sure that that's the best option available. Now, when you're in opposition, you don't have all the experts around you to be able to do that detailed work, so it's something I need to do in government.
Do you already have the working group already?
No. We will establish that in government, but I've made it really clear. It will never apply to the family home. I'm really clear on that, and the reason we're doing this is to make our taxation system fair. Someone who works a 40-hour week pays tax in a way that someone who owns multiple investment properties and sells them for income doesn't. So I want to bring fairness into the system. Now, they may not recommend a capital gains tax, which is why I've really just had to say I'm going to do the work, but I've got to maintain the right to look at what that working group comes back with. But I'm being really open with voters that that's the work I'm going to do.
Okay, great. Thank you. And about the plastic bags, will you ban that?
No, we haven't come out and said that we would ban plastic bags. The reason for that is actually there's lots of different work going on in different councils. So we've got a few different approaches. Phil Goff here in Auckland, an excellent mayor, he's looked at a levy to try and encourage people to stop using single-use bags. Some supermarkets already charge. Some places like Waiheke don't use bags at all. I want to sit down and look at what's working, work with councils and say what's going to work best in your area and go from there.
But it won't be a policy for in Labour?
It's not something that we're campaigning on, but we do need to make sure that we address the issue and get some consistency. I think most New Zealanders would agree, though, that single-use bags are actually problematic for our environment. So working together to find some solutions.
But do you agree reducing the plastic?
Oh, absolutely. Reducing the use of single-use bags. I think probably everyone would agree with that.
Sure. 因为时间关系，我们要先进一段广告，待会再回到我们下段节目。欢迎回到我们第二段节目。今天的访谈嘉宾是工党的党魁 Jacinda Ardern。是 Jacinda, about the immigration, Labour wants to cut the numbers of immigrants by 20,000, 30,000 to 45,000. How do you maintain the productivity and prosperity while some sectors are complaining the shortage of skilled workers? Don't you think it is a real shortage in some industries?
Oh, I absolutely agree. There are shortages in some industries, and what we've said, if you've got a genuine position, a vacancy that can't be filled and you need a skilled migrant, you should be able to access that skilled migrant. So that's a pledge that we've made. But what we want to make sure is that there are genuine gaps, and that also that we meet another challenge that we have. In Auckland, at the moment, we're just not offering a good opportunities for our migrants who are coming into Auckland. It is an Auckland-specific problem. We want them to have a decent job opportunities. We want them to have decent housing to be able to move around their city. And at the moment, our infrastructure hasn't kept pace with our population growth. So really, it's really the fault of poor planning more than anything else. So what we need to do is make sure that we catch up on that infrastructure challenge so that actually we can give those who choose to call New Zealand home a great opportunity, a great chance to make a good life here in New Zealand. Look, the way that we've done that, though, is by looking at, for instance, what's happening in our education sector. There's been quite a few rule changes over the past few years. And that does mean that we have seen some exploitation for people who are coming in, taking up lower level courses that aren't particularly good qualifications. They've then been able to stay on and find work, and often some of those then find themselves being exploited. That's not good for anyone. It's not good for New Zealand. It's not good for the students. So we want to tighten up on that, make sure that people who come and pay good money to learn in New Zealand come away with a good course.
Yes, and how about the job the shortage?
Yes, so we want to make sure that if there's still skills gap, people will be able to certainly come in to fill those. particularly in our regions. One of the problems we've had, though, is that if you're on a skills gap category, it might be a shortage in, say, the Hawke's Bay, but not a shortage in Auckland. But then we'll make a one-size-fits-all approach. We want to actually have a regional list. So we'll work with businesses and employers, and if they can say we've got a skills gap that exists, say, in Canterbury that doesn't exist in Auckland, we'll still make sure that you can meet that in those regions, because there's lots of areas where they're crying out for extra workers. It's just Auckland where we really need to take a little bit of time to make sure we catch up on infrastructure problems.
Yeah, and the new immigrants would love to settle in Auckland. So that's a huge population in Auckland. How Labour, what
yeah, well, actually, ultimately, I think it's about matching where the skills gaps are and those migrants who want an opportunity to fill those gaps, and making sure we're doing that pairing, basically. So not all of that is in Auckland. In fact, I've certainly spoke to different mayors who really are excited about the idea of having those regional skills lists and categories so that we can help them and simply not make sure that Auckland dictates all of our immigration policy, because really this is about just making sure that we can meet the needs and the expectations of both our migrants and our employers.
So will Labour change the immigration policy if you are in the government after election?
So the policy that we've been campaigning on for some time now stays. And yes, we've made some estimates around what impact that will have on numbers, but they are ultimately just estimates. Our goal is to meet the needs of business, to make sure we give the best opportunities possible, and we've made an estimate about the impact that will have. But my pledge again is, if a business has a genuine gap they need to fill, they will still be able to fill it.
So that still will be 43?
Yeah, so the estimate that we've made, estimates we've made is that we'll have our policy likely to have an impact of around 20 to 30,000. But just to give some idea of scale, when Labour left office, we had net migration around 40,000. At the moment, it's sitting around 70,000. So even then, even with our policies, we'll be sitting at a higher rate than even when we last left office.
Sure. And about the capital gains tax, so will the capital gain tax on the property speculators help cooling down the house market and create more home ownership?
Well, that's our goal. You know, when my parents bought their home in the 1970s, a simple home in Hamilton, we had some of the highest home ownership rates in the world. And in part that was because we were building a lot of houses, but also incomes relative to house prices were more in keeping. You know, our ambition is that by building more houses, by closing tax loopholes, by banning foreign overseas-based speculators, that we can make home ownership a reality again. At the moment, it's the worst it's been in 60 years, but I'm not giving up on people being able to own their own home. I want it to be, I want everyone to have that opportunity, and you not to have to be reliant on your parents to be able to get into a home.
Sure, and I would think that's a huge cry from the Aucklanders. We can't afford to live in Auckland.
Absolutely.
And how to make our generation own a house, and how many houses will be built in Auckland for the next 10 years?
Well, over 10 years, we hope to build 100,000. Just to give a sense of how we're going to do that, by government actually being behind it, and 50% of that we're hoping will be in Auckland. By government being behind it, by building prefabricated housing, so we know with a bit of kit set technology we can do it quickly. We'd like to build a plant in Gisborne that can help us with that. By building at scale, so being able to build more and being able to access lower costs because we're building at scale. All of that will make a difference. But also training up people to work in that sector, more carpenters. We will need a bit of overseas help to also scale up, but over time, over 10 years, 50,000 in Auckland.
Sure, so that you think that will be catch up with the population growth?
Yeah, certainly that's our expectation. At the same time, we do need more state housing, more emergency housing, because we've got a lot of demand with amongst vulnerable New Zealanders, those who you see down Queen Street who are rough sleeping. We need to cater to them as well, but certainly we hope that'll certainly help us catch up with that demand.
Sure, and what is the ideal affordable house price in Auckland?
Yeah, in Auckland we believe that we can provide apartments, townhouses and standalone houses for between 400 and 600,000. Now look, I know that still sounds very expensive, but the average home the average home in Auckland is about $1 million at the moment.
That's right.
Now, 2008 it used to be roughly 500,000. So what we're trying to do is get back to where we were, but also we've got a few ideas on how we can help people into that first home, because actually it's the deposit that's often a big sticking point.
So does it mean you want to lower the house price?
No, at the moment, no. It's not. We will be building homes that allow us to price them more affordably, because they're not 170 square metres. They're modest first homes, and there's not a lot of them being built in Auckland, so that's part of the problem.
So, yes, in terms of law and order,
yes, we
see quite a lot of crimes involving firearms. So what's your policy to tackle this problem?
Something I feel quite strongly about. You know, and I know this has impacted on the Chinese community. There's a lot of concern.
Especially the small business.
Yes, and that I've certainly heard a lot of feedback around. You know, my father was a policeman. He was a policeman for 40 years. I see a lot of the answers in this is around making sure that we have more local police officers working our local communities. One of the things we've lost is we used to have community hubs. You know, it used to be that there'd be a station or at least a little hub where you'd see your local police officer all of the time, walking around your small businesses, making sure they understood what was happening in the community. They could respond more quickly because they were right there.
Increase the numbers of police?
Yes, increase the number of police.
Well, already have the policy.
Yes, but in part we've... you know, we can have a little debate about the numbers there, but in part what we've committed that is different from the government is bringing them back to our local communities. So rather than just all being in head office, making sure that they're in your local, in your neighbourhood.
Okay, sure. And about the relationship between New Zealand and China, that's exciting that Labour government signed the agreement, free trade agreement with China. So if you are Prime Minister after the election, what are you going to do to maintain and explore the relationship between these two countries?
Yeah, I think that's the key, that yes, the free trade agreement is something Labour feels very, very proud of. It was such an important part of our relationship, and it's been so mutually beneficial. Probably one of the most important agreements we've had. But actually exports now have dipped away a bit since 2014, so I don't think we can take for granted the relationship. I think we need to make sure we continue to build those business connections, those business ties, so that we continue to keep the benefits high for both countries.
Sure. And do you learn any second language?
Yes, in school I did. Don't test me on it though, because I'm a bit rusty.
But you say a few words in Chinese already.
Yes, I did, but they could be much, much better. So I'm a strong believer in our education system, our students having the chance to learn other languages. I think it improves your learning capacity overall, really beneficial. I want that choice to be there for that next generation. So we're certainly looking at ways we can do that. When National came out with their policy of other languages in schools, I said, great, that's a good idea. We just need to make sure we've got the teachers to do it.
Yeah, and the Chinese language week will be coming the middle of October.
Yes.
So I think that's the founding trust and co-chaired by
Raymond.
Yeah,
and
I think that's the Labour should learn the Chinese.
We should. And you know, Raymond is very good at making sure he keeps tutoring us, but I want to acknowledge the work that he's done.
Yes, it will be the 4th year, really.
Yeah, and incredibly important to have that formally recognised, and that was done through the advocacy of Raymond, and I really acknowledge that, and think what we'll do as well, having Nacy in Parliament as well.
Yeah, you have the tutors in your party.
Yeah, indeed. Only if people keep voting for Labour though, of course. You know, we need party voters, how we bring our list MPs into Parliament. So every time someone ticks the box for the Labour Party, that enables us to have our MPs like Raymond and like Nacy Chen.
Sure. About the campaigning tour, I believe you're campaigning all New Zealand.
Yes.
Yeah, and politicians always like holding baby,
kissing
babies. And what's happened if your baby in your hands and they start crying?
Well, you know, I have a couple of tricks of the trade. I always check that the babies had something to eat before I hold them, just in case if they're hungry, they always cry.
Aren't you afraid of the puke just to pick up in front of you?
That's another risk. But often, you know, often it will be, you know, mums and dads who will just pass their children to you, so sometimes you just have to be prepared.
Do you kiss them? Kiss the babies?
Oh, a little hold, you know. You never know. You never know. They may not enjoy that, so just a little hold, a little play.
Yeah, and you have the long hair.
That's a risk too.
Putting your hair.
Earrings as well, often.
Oh,
yeah.
Earring. That's right.
That's the hazards of being a politician.
All right, so that's our interview is coming to the end. So probably you can have some, a few minutes for you to tell our voters to take part of the election and vote. Why should we vote your party?
Thank you. Well, my first message would be, please make sure that you're enrolled this election. Check your details so that you're eligible when voting day comes to go in and vote. And remember, you can also vote early, 2 weeks before polling day. But my message around voting Labour is really simple. Now, we believe that New Zealand really thrives as a country when we make sure that we invest in our people. Business does well, we all do well, when we all have access to good healthcare, cheaper healthcare. That's why we want to bring down doctors' visits by $10. We want everyone to have a good education and for your local school to be the best school possible, which is why we're investing in education too. And that means eventually making 3 years free post-secondary education. It's also really important that everyone has access to warm, decent, affordable housing. That's why we'll ban foreign overseas speculators, close tax loopholes and build more houses, so that those who choose to make New Zealand their home have a chance to get into that housing market. We want to make New Zealand a great place for everyone to live. We've got an economic plan that shows how we'll do it. We've released that so everyone can see that actually everything we've promised is affordable, will allow our economy to be stable, to continue to thrive. I'm really grateful for the relationship that we have with our Chinese community. In part, it's been built first by Norman Kirk, Helen Clark, and in more recent times, our amazing representation by MPs and candidates like Raymond Kuo and Naisi Chen. I look forward as the leader of the Labour Party to continuing to build that important relationship, make sure we're responding to the needs of the community on issues like law and order, and build stronger ties between New Zealand and China. Please vote Labour this election. 谢谢。
非常感谢Jacinda。在这也要提醒观众朋友，如果说你是合格选民的话，一定要去选委会登记注册为一个选民，才有资格在9月23日当天去投下您神圣的一票。Thank you again, Jacinda.
Thank you.
也谢谢观众朋友的收看，我们就下次再会。Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
2017决战国会由以下商家特约播映 ：Restaco 专注土地测量、精于分割规划；8番汤森、姚太郎、鲁阳阳，您房产交易的吉祥二宝；JR Group 嘉瑞建筑，诚实为人，诚信为事；嘉利宝纽西兰特产品店，电话0957928878；8番汤森地产中介屈瑞，手机微信0211900881；帝王私人安全保险柜，我们专注保护您的重要财物。PGF 保温隔音棉，绿色环保，与您共创温馨家园。8番汤森 Wayne 郭伟，电话0216802263。Carwold 车世界，买车卖车就选北岸 Carwold。